everyone. It's good to see you. Well, I'm not really seeing you, but I'm glad you're back. Let's talk about gradients now. So this will be a quick overview of gradients. The gradient tool is pretty involved. There's a lot there, but let's take a look at it, right? So gradients are an alternative to filling an element with a color, right? So a gradient is a color that fades from one to the next. And actually you can put as many stops in there as you want. So you can have, imagine like a ruler, and then you had colors placed along that ruler, and as you went from one color to the next, you know, as you moved down the ruler, the color faded from one color to the next color to the next color until you got to the end of the ruler, right? Gradients can also be radial, so they can go in circles. So imagine like a target or like a dartboard of colors in circles, right? Where each circle, you know, is concentric and fades from one to the next, right? Let's take a quick look. So I have two pages here. So here is the Mozilla page right here that shows us a gradient. This is a very nice gradient right here. You know, we could borrow this and use it on our page. Maybe I'll go to my Zen Garden page here and set this as the background for the body, you know, and then I have my gradient. Maybe it doesn't work with my text color. It's a little too dark, right? But otherwise it's a nice color, right? So, so there's a linear gradient. So this is linear. So it runs smoothly in a straight line, right? If you want, you can also rotate the gradient. So this one is another linear gradient. And what's happening here is we're actually, with this first one, we're transitioning from this color to the next color, okay? In the second one, we're doing the same thing, except they're adding in this turn property, and it's like rotating the gradient. I think you can put degrees in here, so you can do 45 degrees, right? So if I put in 45 degrees, this is the angle that the gradient is on, 45 degrees. They put turn in there, that's like a unit for rotation, right? Okay. And you can also use a keyword to say where you're, you know, running your gradient from. So you can say to the left or to the right or to the bottom, right? Okay, so here's another gradient. This one has a couple more stops in it. The stops include the color, and they can also have a percentage. So here I'm starting on 333, and then we're going to go to 333 for a while, and that's why we get a solid band here. Okay, so I'm going to go from here to 333 at 50%. So this is starting at the beginning. It's kind of like I said, 0% here. Okay, and then I'm going to go to 333 at 50%, right? It actually doesn't quite look like, oh, because I guess it says to the left. So actually my mistake, we're starting over on the right side and we're going 50% to here, okay? Instead of to, I was thinking in this term, like to the right, right? So, so anyway, so we get a feel for how this works, right? And then this EEE, these are all grays, right? So this is at 75%, we're going to go to EEE, which is almost white, like FFF would be white. So we went from gray 333 to gray 333. There's no change, right? And then from here we went, and that's at 50% of the distance. And then from here to 75% of the distance, we're going to go to the EEE, or the really light color, right? And then at the next color, we're going to do 333 at 75%. So that means we're going to start the 333 here and then continue that color all the way to the end. And that's why we get a sharp line, okay? So this is really interesting, right? There's actually like a lot of interesting things you can do with this, right? Let's look at this last one. Wow, that's kind of crazy, right? I think I want to put that on my webpage. You know, I'll do it later, right? But this is another one. You can stack up, the idea here is that you can stack up the gradient. So you can put more than one gradient into the page at once. So here, each gradient, we set it as the background color, right? So I say background colon, right? And then I separate each gradient with a comma. So these are all the rules for the gradient, and then I have a comma, right? And this is a little weird, but it says linear gradient, and then we have 215 degrees, comma, and then RGB, and then you got to have the whole RGB value, comma, and then RGB, comma, right, all the way to the end. And then this is kind of just saying what the ending percentage is, right? So it should go to 70 point whatever percent, I think, if I'm reading that correctly, right? So it should be this color out to this location, right? Maybe I'm not reading that right. I think that's right, okay? But anyway, so there's a lot you can do with this. And actually, while we're on the idea of like what's possible with gradients, let me show you this. Look up gradient. Actually, I'm going to do CSS patterns. Actually, I think this will find it, right? So there's this CSS background patterns by Magic Pattern, right? And we'll click on this. All of these patterns are created with gradients. Okay, so they're all done with just the gradient tool. I don't know that it's such a good idea to do this with a gradient, because you could do the same thing with a background image that was repeated. Might be hard to do this one, though you could do a cover or a contain, right, to fill the space, right? These you could just make a little circle that was like, you know, just this big, and then you could repeat it. So, but you can do this, right? All of these were created with a gradient. And actually, just to give credit where credit is due, these were originally the first time I saw this, it came up with this person, Leah Veru. And I think she got she started her master's degree at like MIT or some big college with these patterns. So she made a whole website about and wrote a thesis article about these CSS patterns, right? Using gradients to create these patterns. And then she created this website too. So all of these patterns here are created with CSS. So that's kind of kooky. Like, how do they do that, right? So if we look at the waves pattern here, you can see that this is the CSS that they used, right? So they did a circle at, right? I didn't talk about the circle, but that's another option there to do a radial gradient. So this is like alternating radial gradients, and every gradient, I guess, is 75 by 100, right? So anyway, so that should give you a place to explore and take a look at the CSS gradient property. Explore in here, and also follow up with this link right here. And this is for the radial gradients, okay? So you can play around with these and take a look at what's happening with the radial gradients, okay? So you can stop the video now, take a look and experiment with that, and maybe take a look at Leah Veru's pattern gallery, right? Because some of these are pretty amazing. What can be done with like this, that's kind of crazy, right? So take a look at those and then come back to the lesson, and we'll continue and we'll do some experimentation, right? Actually, you know, before we stop, let's do one other thing, right? This link right here links to a gradient editor, right? And we'll take a look at this in the next video, right? But you can also take a look at this here to design your own gradients. This one, there might be a better one. This one's been around for like years and years. And so the design of it is a little outdated, right? It's a little hard to read, but anyway, it's pretty good. It works well. So take a look at this and then come back and we'll continue in the next video.